the seduction of being still is profound, because when you get into that place, as you found, you don't suffer. All the suffering ceases. And to not suffer, of course, is most people consider that to be pretty good. And so the impetus is there to recreate that space of quiet and to continue not suffering. So that is, I think, what most people experience in their seeking. How that will play out for you, we'll have to see. But there is a little something extra here that may be of interest for you. You've already determined that it's pretty difficult to stay quiet, to stay in that space of silence and stillness. Life keeps happening. You keep being pulled back into reactivity. And I'm afraid that's going to continue for as long as you live. But there is good news. And that is that your suffering is actually not tied to the presence or absence of that quietude. That stillness, that cessation of action, that space of non-movement, is not a requirement for peace, is not a requirement for ease and comfort in your being. That in fact, when you begin to look into the matter and you begin to realize where your suffering arises out of, then the model changes. Current model is, I need to get more quiet in order to get more peace. That's the basic model.
Less reactivity.
Less reactivity, yes.
Less emotion.
Yeah, less emotion. And I mean, I understand this because I tried it. I really did. I mean, I gave it as good a shot as I could give it. You know, to be non-reactive, to be non-emotional. And you know, like I turned off rock and roll music in my car because it got me amped, you know, got me up. And you know, I would turn on Kenny G. And you know, I mean, nobody ever got passionate behind Kenny G. I mean, it's just not, it didn't happen. So, you know, it was good. It was good. You know, it was mellow and, you know, created a kind of a, you know, a non-reactive kind of space. And I stopped eating meat because, you know, the meat, the death of the, you know, the dying animal gets in you and that amps you up and stuff, so you don't want that. Sex, of course, you know, sex gets you really moving around.
Probably the big
That's the big one. That's the big one. So, you know, I found I was able to not have sex. especially at that time, I was at the end of a very dead marriage, so it was really easy not to have sex. But it was not possible for me not to think about sex, not to experience sexuality in my body. You know, I was at that time, a 30-something-year-old male with testosterone and sexual energy in my being. So to not, I mean, you can resist it, you can constrict it, you can pack it in, but it's there. It's there. You know. So that was my experience. And I gave it a good shot. I really did. I really, really did. You know, and then I just I thought, okay, you know, this whole business is like a pendulum, you know. I found that I was drawn to things, you know, I had preferences, I had desires, and so I got drawn to things. And then the energy of being drawn to that had the energy of its opposite in it. So it would always swing back the other way. You know, and so my objective was to get the swing to stop by not following my desires, not following my passions, not reacting, not responding. That if I could just get here centered, quiet, still, then I would be okay. I'd be at peace. I wouldn't be suffering. You know, I'd be centered, quiet, still, at peace. And I really wanted that. I really tried. And so I had a problem, and it came back to sex. It was like, I thought, okay, I know I'm not supposed to have these preferences. And I'm trying to imagine myself actually devoid of preference. Absolutely not reacting. Whatever is okay. And I imagine myself sitting there, and I have a beautiful woman who wants to make love to me, right here. And I have a big, ugly, angry man on this side who wants to beat the shit out of me. And I have no preference. And I knew I was never going to get there. This was not going to happen. Not only that, I didn't want it to happen. This wasn't an appealing idea of life to me. That I really didn't give a shit whether I got to make love or I had the shit beat out of me. It really didn't matter. It was all the same. That was not my idea, of life. So, fortunately, I did meet Ramesh. In time, before I developed a permanent twitch, trying to keep all this in like this. And he said, I explained what I was trying to do with all this. And I said, so I'm trying to, because they say that the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. There's a very famous sutra. Great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. So I said, I'm trying not to have any preferences. And so I'm trying to get here, Ramesh, just silent, still, centered, in the middle. Equanimous. Non-reactive. And Ramesh said, wait. So do you know what this is? I said, what? He said, this is death. When this stops, that's death. And your problem, the problem you're experiencing, is that you are trying to be dead while you're alive.
I hear you. Can I speak?
Of course.
It ties into some philosophies and teachings about actually experiencing a mystical death, allowing that part of you to actually die so that you can live from a place that's not intellectual and animal and reactive and programmed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that packing in that you feel, the idea is to transmute it, to use it to rise up through your spine.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, yeah, it is. I love the articulation. It's like trying to be dead while you're alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I offer you that information, hoping you have some more information to get back.
Oh, that those kinds of teachings exist?
Well, yeah.
Oh,
I know you know that, but
Well, yeah. I mean, every conceivable whack job idea is out there. Some really good ones, some amazingly bizarre and tweaked ones are all out there. And I mean, some of them have big followings.
Mhm.
Really, really big followings. You know, it seems like a really good idea. How about The Secret?
right, exactly.
Millions and millions and millions and millions of people out there going, I'm just going to make it happen. I can do that.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's like all this agreement. Everybody's going, yeah, you can do that. And you know, there's all the testimonials of, I did that and I got fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Everything from a parking space to, you know, a movie contract
Right.
to, you know, everything. I got it, I imagined it, I affirmed it, envisioned it, created it, made it happen, and it came to be. So, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there. And the mere fact that lots of people are behind it doesn't necessarily make it true.
But it feels true to be still. It feels more true to me.
Well,
You know?
yes, well, it does. It does. Because, and here's a little twist on that. And I'm going to have to back up and give you a little background to an idea that may illuminate something. It's what I call the false sense of authorship. And the false sense of authorship is what happens to you at age 2, basically. At the age of 2, you develop the sense that I am separate, and I am independent, and I'm powerful. I make things happen. And this claim of authorship is actually a claim that attaches to what happens. In life, through your programming, through your genes, through your conditioning, through the circumstances of life, you do things. You do good things, you do bad things, you do all kinds of things. And then it is this claim of authorship, this false sense of authorship, which attaches to those things. And when that happens, you suffer. You suffer because there's a sense, I should be able to manage this better. I should be able to create a positive outcome for myself. You suffer because even though you should, you can't, because you don't have the power to do it. Bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you get quiet, you're still. There is stillness. There is nothing happening. There is nothing for the false sense of authorship to claim and say, I'm doing that. Except, of course, the silence itself. Because the one thing about the false sense of authorship, and you may have observed this already, is that it will claim anything. Even the silence. And say, I am responsible for making this silence happen. I can do this. I just have to be more dedicated, be more this, be more that. Same old message. It's just now applied to the spiritual thing. So you're actually still back in the loop. But the carrot dangling out is that sometimes you do get quiet. Sometimes the quiet happens. And when the quiet happens, there is the peace that attends to the absence of the false sense of authorship, because the false sense of authorship has nothing to get involved with at that moment. So what is actually the product of the absence of the false sense of authorship is experienced as being the product of the silence itself. When you realize that it is the false sense of authorship that is responsible for the suffering, and that then you realize that the false sense of authorship is absent, it doesn't matter whether there's silence, whether there's activity, whether there's good shit happening, whether there's bad shit happening. If there's no involvement by the false sense of authorship, there's no suffering. And it's not dependent upon being in a particular state that is untenable to maintain. Because life is full of the polaric opposites. It's the very nature of life.